She collapsed at my fruit stand. Then whispered, "Don't call his family." The woman took 3 steps toward my fruit stand before her knees suddenly gave way. 1 second, she was walking beside the road with one hand wrapped around her stomach and the other gripping the strap of a worn handbag. The next, she was on the gravel, struggling to breathe. I ran from behind my wooden counter, dropped beside her, and asked if she could hear me. Her eyes opened slowly, filled with fear rather than pain. Then she grabbed my wrist and whispered the strangest thing I had ever heard from a stranger, "Please, don't call his family." My name is Daniel, and for 12 years I had sold apples, peaches, oranges, and whatever else the nearby farms produced from my little roadside stand. I wasn't rich. Some weeks, I barely made enough to cover the rent and groceries. But my father had taught me that a person's worth was never measured by the size of their bank account. If someone needed help, you helped them. So when that frightened woman collapsed in front of me, I didn't care about her expensive-looking bracelet or the nice car parked farther down the road. I only cared that she was safe. If you believe kindness can give someone a second chance, please like, comment, share this story, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of compassion can change an entire life. I helped the woman sit against the wooden side of my stand and gave her water. She was heavily pregnant, and the sight of her trembling hands made me even more worried. I asked whether I should call an ambulance, but she immediately shook her head. She said she wasn't seriously ill and that she only needed a few minutes to rest. But when I asked where her family was, her expression changed completely. She looked toward the highway as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Then she repeated that I must not call her husband's family. Her name was Sarah. She told me she had left home that morning after discovering something that frightened her. Her husband had been away for several days, and while searching for an important document, she had found papers hidden inside a locked desk. They showed that a large amount of money had been transferred from an account belonging to her late father's estate. Sarah believed the money had been taken without her permission. When she asked her husband's relatives about it, they told her she had misunderstood the documents and should stop asking questions. But Sarah knew something was wrong. She had planned to go to her mother's old farmhouse in another town, but she had become exhausted while driving and had pulled over near my stand. She hadn't even realized how weak she was until she collapsed. I wanted to help, but I was also frightened. I was a fruit seller, not a detective. I had no idea whether her story was true. Still, leaving a pregnant woman alone on a roadside felt impossible. I called the local clinic from my own phone and asked them to send someone. Sarah finally agreed to be examined. While we waited, a black SUV slowly passed the stand. Sarah immediately became pale. She lowered her voice and told me not to let the people inside know she was there. The SUV continued down the road. A few minutes later, a nurse arrived and checked Sarah. Thankfully, she was not in immediate danger, but she was severely exhausted and needed rest. The nurse arranged for her to stay temporarily at a nearby women's shelter while the situation was investigated. Before leaving, Sarah asked me to hold her handbag. Inside it was a small photograph of a little boy. She told me the boy was her younger brother, who had died years earlier. The photograph was the only thing she had left of him. That detail stayed with me. The next morning, Sarah returned to the fruit stand. She looked exhausted but calmer. She told me she had nowhere else she trusted. She asked if I could help her contact a lawyer without telling her husband's relatives where she was. I agreed. Over the next several days, the mystery slowly unfolded. The documents Sarah had discovered showed that money belonging to her father's estate had been moved through several accounts connected to a company controlled by her husband's family. But there was something even more disturbing. Her father's original will had contained a clause protecting the money until Sarah's child reached adulthood. Someone had apparently been trying to take control of it. Sarah's husband eventually contacted her and insisted that everything was a misunderstanding. He promised that the family only wanted to protect her. But Sarah no longer trusted promises. Then one afternoon, the black SUV returned. 2 men stepped out. They approached my stand and asked whether I had seen Sarah. I told them hundreds of customers came through every week. They stared at me for several seconds before walking away. That night, I sat alone inside my small house and wondered whether I had made a terrible mistake. I was not prepared for threats or legal trouble. I had a business to protect. I had bills. I had responsibilities. But then I remembered Sarah lying helplessly on the gravel. I couldn't turn my back on her now. The lawyer eventually obtained enough evidence to open an investigation. Sarah's husband's family tried to claim that the documents were forged, but bank records told a different story. Money had indeed been moved without proper authorization. Sarah's husband was not responsible for every transaction, but several relatives had been hiding information from her. The truth finally came out during a court hearing. Sarah's father had created the estate to protect his daughter and future grandchild. The money was meant to provide them security, not become a prize for whoever could manipulate Sarah. The court froze the disputed accounts while the investigation continued. Sarah was finally safe. Months passed. The baby was born healthy. Sarah returned to the fruit stand one spring morning carrying a tiny blanket and a smile I hadn't seen before. She thanked me for helping her when she had been terrified and alone. I told her I hadn't done anything extraordinary. But she disagreed. She said that when she collapsed beside my fruit stand, she believed her entire world had disappeared. She had lost trust in people, lost faith in her family, and didn't know where she would go next. Then one stranger had simply stopped to help. Years later, my fruit stand was still there. The wooden boards were older, the paint had faded, and the baskets had been replaced several times. But one thing remained unchanged. Above the counter hung a small handwritten sign. It said, "If you're hungry, take what you need. Pay when you can." Sarah had given it to me. She told me she wanted other people to experience the same kindness she had received that frightening morning. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope when life feels impossible. And before the final line, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness can change a life," if you believe helping one person can create a ripple of hope. Sometimes we imagine that changing someone's life requires money, power, or something extraordinary. But Sarah taught me something different. Sometimes it only takes a roadside fruit stand, a frightened stranger, and one person willing to stop. Because on the day she collapsed, I thought I was simply helping a woman who needed a place to rest. I never realized she would remind me, and everyone who heard her story, that when the world feels frightening, one kind hand can become the beginning of a new life.